Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge. In today's episode, fine. I won't wear those boots anymore. You win. Another tale of me in dress codes. You'll need a ticket for that. May I suck your succulent? Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Fine. I won't wear those boots anymore. You win. Another tale of me in dress codes. Background, you can skip this part if you like a shorter read. If you read my Recess MC story, then you already know I'm not a fan of dress codes for the sake of dress codes. So when I left for boarding school, I was utterly thrilled to go to a school that didn't have any uniform at all. Okay, so it's not really that I have a problem with dress codes. I have a problem with conforming. So if you say socks have to be black or blue, 99.999999% of people will assume that you mean navy blue. I'm the person who would show up with sky blue. Just to silently stand out for a day. Just to give a smirk to the 5 other people who'll think, well, they did just say blue. Just to highlight to the bureaucrat who wrote the rules that they're not as airtight as they thought they were. In short, I am, as my hubby would say, a brat. It's just fun to me to show people that either / or doesn't always have to be your only choices. We'll just say I was an adventurous dresser. I liked unusual combinations, and had I been encouraged instead of discouraged, and taught how to sew, I very probably would have ended up as a low-level fashion designer. Clothes were like paint to me after an entire childhood in the same plaid. I wanted to mix colors and textures and brushes. Boarding school is not really a colorful, choose-your-own-adventure kind of place. Well, though I was a precocious child, I was never a rule breaker, save for very calculated rule breaking in my previous story. My mother always said voodoo daughter's obedient and well behaved. She will bend a rule into a pretzel. But she'll never intentionally break one. She was the kind of parent who had to carefully word rules and restrictions when leaving me to my own devices, but also be careful not to put ideas into my head, at the same time. Basically, if you give me the impression that you believe something is ironclad, I'll pick it apart just because I enjoy the mental exercise of seeing if it really is ironclad. But if you're a jerk, I'm going to find the worst way to show you it's not ironclad. My mother firmly believed that critical thinking is the key to success in life. If you can assess a problem and find a path to a solution, then you don't need to know everything. You just need to know how to find answers. Mind you, this was about a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't blame parents today for different mentalities. But I do still think I would raise my kids this way if I were going to have any. So I had been raised to believe that the people who get ahead in life are the people who don't just say apple when asked what that red round thing on the desk is. You pick it up. You turn it over. You note the feel and the weight. You mark the smell and the reflections in the wax. And you file that away for later. Never know when someone's going to ask you what the bottom of an apple looks like when there are no apples to look at, right? Anyhow, when you spend your life mentally picking up every problem, question, and object so you can flip it over, turn it inside out, change the colors, etc., mundane things like school handbooks actually become a bit fun. The story. I went to a boarding school with 2 types of dress code. We had classroom dress, which was exactly what it sounds like. We were basically expected to look like young professionals. All the normal rules you would expect. Skirts below the fingertips for girls, shirts and ties for the boys. The handbook was pretty specific, as most are. The alternative was what we could wear in our free time town dress, and it was the standard we were expected to dress to when seen in public off campus, or just spending time in the students' lounge. This was more relaxed, but still rules to keep the girls from wearing anything too sexy, or the boys from looking too ragged in torn / cut off / worn out clothes. That sort of stuff. I had a pair of knee-high suede moccasin boots with fringe at the top, just below the knee. Actually, I had 2 pairs. One in black. One in brown. They were the most comfortable, warm boots I ever owned, long before the days of Uggs. My mother and I fought constantly over these boots, and it was a great triumph to me that she'd allowed me to spirit them away to school with me. Then one day I was approached by a teacher who told me that the teachers had had a discussion, and my boots weren't in the spirit of classroom dress. But I've read the dress code. There's nothing in there against them. I protested. I know. It's just been decided they don't meet the spirit of the dress code. She elaborated. But they're the right color. I know. They're the right fabric. Suede is allowed. I know. There's no restriction on boot length. You allow riding boots for the equestrian club. I know. Then why? I don't really know if I was angry or sad or an even split of both. But I was emotional. I wish I had better answers for you. She was a teacher I liked and I knew liked me. I realized it's why they'd sent her. I wasn't the sort to make a scene or cause a fuss. I was the sort to get even. Okay, I said and walked off. That night, I studied the dress code front to back. I read every sentence forwards and backwards. I said them out loud. I held up every article of clothing mentioned and studied it as if I were an alien who had nothing but the handbook and that piece of clothing to figure out how it was used by humans. It was a pretty strict handbook, I had to give them that. But they had made two mistakes. The handbook was oddly unspecific about which items of clothing were to be worn where. Nowhere did the handbook say we had to make an effort to actually look good. They discussed what articles of clothing needed to be what colors and how far they needed to extend in certain directions, skirts below the fingertips, socks above the ankles, sleeves past the elbows, etc. Shoes had to be reasonable colors like black or brown, like my boots were, or other earth tones. But it never said they couldn't be elf shoes, for example. Granted, elf shoes wouldn't be in the spirit of classroom dress. But I digress. I went to bed furious and with vicious ideas circling in my mind, debating whether or not I wanted to pull this particular trigger. Eventually I decided I'd wait until morning, and if I still felt that way, I would begin phase 1. The next morning, I woke up still pissed and began a mental list of the worst boys in my grade as I walked to breakfast. When I got there, I found a few of them and pointed out that the handbook specified that ties were to be tied in a single or double Windsor knot at all times unless it was a bow tie, and then it was to be tied in the traditional manner. Don't know what that's called. What it didn't specify is what part of the body it was to be affixed to. Nowhere did it specify that ties had to be tied around the neck. Just how they needed to be tied. I told them they didn't have to believe me. Just read their handbooks that night and do what they will with the information. The next day, there were ties on wrists, around eyeglasses, for heads, ankles, knees, thighs, tied then wrapped around hands as if to stop bleeding knuckles. Anywhere you could attach a Windsor knot to the human body, there was a boy in my school with a tie there. I was feeling pretty darn proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were annoyed but most found it amusing. Until we got to math class. There was a kid in class without his tie on. The one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher walked up to his desk and looked down her nose at him. I understand you boys are having some fun with your ties today. And I think we've been pretty good sports. But if you know the handbook this well, then you know you at least have to be wearing a tie. He raised his head, smirked, and said, "Oh, I'm wearing one. You just can't see it." The class erupted. Now maybe he just had it under his pants on his ankle. Or tied around his elbow under his blazer. I'll never know. But he went down as the kid who came to class with his tie around his PE asterisk is. By the end of the day, I was a legend for finding the loophole, and he was a legend for what he had put the loophole around. By morning announcements, the dress code had been updated. We were all handed a printed page, so we couldn't claim we didn't know, to include specifications about ties around necks, and the fun was over for the boys. Phase 2 was a little more in-depth read on if you're not already bored. I studied the handbook and I took mental notes. I had been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver with holographic rainbow interlocking circles on them. They sported a 2-inch platform with a chunky 4-inch heel, and laced up just above the ankles. They looked like something Romy and Michelle would have worn in their final prom scene or Fran Drescher in The Nanny. Ungodly. I knew I couldn't wear them to class, but I wanted them for town days so bad. Like I said, after 9 years in uniform, I was having fun with fashion. I saved for months and visited them at the mall every chance I got. I had been slowly talking myself out of such a frivolous pair of boots, they were so expensive, but the loss of my favorite classroom boots had reinvigorated my lust for them. And right after my moccasins were revoked, I had managed to save up just enough to afford them. Lucky me. I practically skipped to the store to get my holographic rainbow platform boots that weekend. They were out of my size. I nearly cried. Until I noticed right next to them was the black patent leather version. Until now, they had seemed so tame by comparison. But the dress code had a special section about patent leather footwear. It was specifically permitted but only when wearing pants. There's an old, idiotic, belief that you can see the reflection of a girl's panties in patent leather shoes if she's wearing a skirt. So I could not wear the rainbow boots to class. But their sister boots in black patent leather with silver details were totally permitted, silver also being specifically permitted on shoes, as some might have grommets for laces, bwahahaha. Still sporting the 2-inch platform and 4-inch heel, mind you. The school didn't have any limits on heel size, assuming high schoolers wouldn't want to be in heels all day, I guess. Something about losing the whimsy of the silver holographic rainbows also had the bonus effect of taking them from a club kid mood to a darker hooker boots realm. And to think, I would never have even considered the black pair, if it weren't for my recent fascination with our dress code. The black boots also happened to be on discount, whereas my silver ones would have been full price. So I walked away with enough money to buy a pair of pants to wear with my new boots. A plan began to formulate in my devious brain. I invited my friends to join me at one of the local thrift stores, and we spent the afternoon hunting for the ugliest pants we could find that were still within the guidelines of the school dress code. And we did. They were bright orange polyester pants with little gray-green amorphous dots on them. Something akin to an incredibly tiny giraffe print. You almost couldn't make out the green, just that there was a pattern to the orange. Something about the two colors clashed enough that they almost vibrated in front of your eyes, making you half dizzy / half nauseated if you stared too long. And as luck would have it, I scored a deal on an orange shag sweater that was the exact same shade. I looked like a half-finished Sesame Street character on top and a Lost Disco reject on bottom. Oh, did mention they were slightly belled straight-legged orange polyester pants. I strolled into class on Monday looking like a rejected extra from Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had heavy wooden heels that clunked loudly everywhere I walked. I now stood 4 inches taller, making me stand out even more in the halls, and rivaling some of my teachers for presence in the classroom. I watched some of them glare at my new boots and began to figure out which ones had taken issue with my knee-high moccasins. I could tell the teachers who were getting a laugh out of it too. But I didn't stop there. It became my life's mission to seek out the most horrendous clothing and outfits I could concoct. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I had been so careful when I packed to make sure my clothes had all been suitable. And by their own admission, my boots were within the code. They just hadn't liked them. I had done my utmost to dress within their rules, and they had arbitrarily decided something wasn't good enough because they didn't like it. So now I wore something hideous every single day, so they had to see me in something nobody liked. Every single day. After all, what could they do? Just tell me every single day that I wasn't dressed appropriately but never in violation? At some point I would cry it was personal, maybe even racial. By their own admission it didn't violate the rules. And I was certain to never violate the rules. That just wasn't my style. Plus, at this point in a battle of wills, you can't afford to get sloppy and give the other side any advantage. Mom always said I was stubborn. The nice thing about boarding school is the girls are happy to share clothes around with anyone who will share back. So instead of just one closet, I had like 30 to pick from just in my dorm. Sure, most of my clothes matched each other by intent and planning. But they looked absurd with clothes picked by /4 other people. Someone might have a loud shirt they only wear with a black skirt. But I'd pair it with a printed skirt from 3 rooms down in clashing colors just because I could. Still within code. I wore those hooker boots anytime I didn't have on a skirt. I invested in more polyester than a school should legally be allowed to have on campus for fire safety reasons. I sought out every consignment, vintage, second-hand shop in town, and there were a lot. It was a largely hippie town, so the pickings were fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so butch they actually asked my mother if I was gay at her parent-teacher conference. Apparently dressing badly makes you a lesbian. I braided my bangs into a single braid and would put heavy earrings at the end to weigh it down, then swing it around like a pendulum over my desk or book during class by swirling my head. Only if I was bored in a class of a teacher I suspected of costing me my boots. Anything and everything I could do to be visually assaulting to the senses, I did. At the above-mentioned parent-teacher meeting, they asked my mom if she could speak to me about my clothing, and she asked, surprised, if I was breaking any rules. They explained about the boots. Mom told me she laughed and said there was nothing she could do. If there's one thing my daughter hates, it's being punished for a rule she didn't know existed or a rule that never existed in the first place. If you want to make a rule today to stop her, she won't do it tomorrow. I bet you never saw those boots again. But you took away something she loved for seemingly no good reason. She sees that as a punishment even if you only saw it as a request. And now she's punishing you back. Simple as that. I suggest you just let it go and fix your handbook over the summer. Otherwise, you'll run out of paper, trying to print daily changes to keep up with the loopholes she'll find. My daughter loves finding loopholes. I should never have given her so many riddles as a child. Upon hearing this, they admitted that the only reason my new boots had been ignored thus far is that, this having been my reaction to the banning of the first pair, some were fearful what I might find to wear in retaliation if a second pair was banned. And, obedient student that I was, I never did wear my knee-high suede moccasins again. Random conclusion stuffs. They never did come after me for a single other dress code issue, except once when my skirt was too short, honestly not intentional, each teacher measured slightly differently. And I didn't return the next year for entirely unrelated reasons, so I don't know what changes they may have made. I'll include a photo of the boots. I've kept them all these years later just for the smile I get when I find them in the bottom of a box while looking for something else. And here's the last shirt I'm sure I have from those days. It's literally the ugliest piece of clothing I've ever owned, and I can't bring myself to throw it away, because I think of this story every time I see it and laugh. And I know somewhere is one photo of me in my orange shag outfit. If I ever find it, I will share that as well. I had a blast tearing that dress code to shreds. So remember to take your problems, turn them on their side, flip them inside out, look at life from a funny angle, and you never know what cracks you might find. And it's another great story of my awesome mom totally having my back. Though looking back as an adult, I'll bet she was a little pissed they banned her boots too. I mean, after all, if they had been more specific in the handbook, she could have kept them at home the entire time instead of in my closet at school, gathering dust. Miss you, Mom. You'll need a ticket for that. I work as a developer at a smallish IT company that has, before my involvement, offered a range of products and services on-premise at our customers. A couple of years ago, we started to offer our services and products as a hosted solution as well. This is where I come in. Over the course of a year, me and one other colleague, let's call him Jeff, ported our products to be suited for a multi-tenant environment. This took a fair amount of work as the original products were not suited for multi-tenancy at all. So in the end, we ended up pretty much rewriting everything. Jeff and I were a good team. Our skills complemented each other nicely. Jeff was always the more technical guy, so he was in charge of the server admin stuff, together with the systems core and security features. I was much more focused on the functional side of the products. I did everything from customer interaction to implementing their workflows, to making sure it all looked good and integrated well with the other applications of our customers. In short, while Jeff knew much more of the back end of our products, I knew what was actually happening in it. This of course meant that every single support request for our hosted solution ended up on my desk. The overwhelming majority of those requests were quick and simple fixes, small edits to a workflow here, rerunning a batch job there, that kind of stuff. While I did need Jeff here and there, I was able to do about 90% of those requests myself within about 5 minutes. Sure, we had a technical support team, but they were much more focused on the on-premise customers, and with the hosted solution being significantly different at this point, had little knowledge of the hosted products. I'll cut out a bit in the middle, but about 2 years and a number of reorganizations later, we've ended up at the situation where one of our support staff members, she'll be known as Lisa in this story, knows a fair bit about the hosted system. Jeff has moved to the support team in order to keep our hosted environment running smoothly. And between them, they're able to handle about 80% of the support requests that would normally have filtered down to me. Unfortunately, we are in the situation where the support manager, we'll call him Steve, doesn't like me very much. Sure, Steve is a good manager, he takes care of his staff, and is a great guy to work with if you're on his good side. Nevertheless, I am not. I have full access to everything while he doesn't, and it doesn't sit well with him that I, a measly developer, has more access than him, a manager. Last year, as I returned from holiday, I found all of my rights on the production environment, and all but a few on the test environment, revoked. Jeff explained to me that there has been an audit, and one of the results were that, while I was still doing a lot on the operational side, that wasn't well documented. The level of access that I had didn't match the level that suited my job description, and instead of changing the job description, Steve opted to revoke all my rights. But what if I need to do /insert random task that I still found myself with astonishing frequency? I asked Steve. Steve grinned and said, "We can give you temporary rights, but you'll need a ticket for that." Cue the malicious compliance. I started making a ticket for temporary rights for every single issue that I needed them for. By the end of the week, I had over 100 tickets on my name. The issues that Lisa used to handle were queuing up, as well as she spent more time granting and revoking my access than she was solving the issues that she could solve on her own. Morale, customer satisfaction and ticket resolution scores, essentially an inverse of the amount of time a ticket spent waiting for support action, quickly dropped in unison. Steve doubled down. The problem wasn't with the access management, the problem was with my blatant abuse of the ticketing system. And therefore a new rule was set in place that I was not to be granted access to any of the hosted systems at all anymore. Instead, I was to describe my actions in a request for change (RFC) document, which could then be handled by Lisa or Jeff. Of course, every change still had to be approved by the change manager, which of course so happened to be Steve. Great. Now, issues that took me 5 minutes to fix will take me half an hour to write out. I need to spell out every bit of impact that a change will have, and in such a way that Steve, who is by all means not a technician, understands what I'm talking about. Then Lisa or Jeff will have to make the changes. Of course, if anything unexpected happens, they'll have to roll back, and I'll have to figure out what happened and amend the RFC to cope. All in all, something that used to take me 5 minutes now takes an hour and a half at best. At this point, my productivity is down pretty much 100%. Upper management has noticed this as well. Hearing my explanation and seeing my, by now extensive, paper trail, they intervene by doing the one thing they could reasonably do: they amend my job description to cover the additional tasks that I've been doing since building the system. And with that, Steve has no choice but to reinstate the access that I've had before. Steve still doesn't like me, but at least now the customers get their issues resolved. May I suck your succulent? So, I worked for this torturous company that was killing me slowly, sort of like a Venus fly trap, but worse. The company gave out demerit points for rules that were broken. For instance, if you forgot to put a cover on your coffee mug, 2 demerit points. If you forget your gate card, 1 demerit. If you exceeded 5, you attended an hour-long video explaining the company's demerit system while sitting next to AF * Kexter from HR. Demerits were erased every year on your hiring date, giving you back your squeaky clean slate. No doubt these rules were originally intended for the penal system, aptly named penal. Let's say you were getting 6 months of weekly allergy shots. You would be required to bring in individual doctor's notes, 1 per visit. I made the horrific mistake of thinking my doc could write 1 note stating Monty will be receiving 6 months of treatment starting on September 8th once weekly, saving the embarrassment of asking for a note at every visit, like an a-hole. 3 demerits for breaking the doctor's note rule. Newt was a dumb old thing who was reluctantly placed in HR as a last resort. Newt collected medical notes and kept track of demerits, earning him the name Demerit Dong. Dong had it out for me ever since I came up with his nickname, but he hated me more for dodging demerits and pushing the envelope as far up his butt crack as possible. The only thing that pleased Dong more than demerits was his nutty office plant collection. Dong would tell you all about his beloved juniper bonsai as he made out with a pot of brown-eyed Susans. Monday, I hand Dong my doctor's note. 6 months of allergy shots starting September 8th once weekly. He accepted the note and went back to massaging his spider plant. The very next week, Dong notifies me I have 3 demerits. WTF. I storm into Dong's office. He was tending to his mini cactus trio. I wave a copy of my note. The bastard opens the rule book and points to a line stating that an individual note must be presented for each medical visit. Dong finally got me, and that was the end of that, or was it? Dong asked me what I was allergic to. He chuckles, gets up and starts fingering his fern. I know damn well he reads every note in my file. For this very reason, I always insert a strange medical condition or affliction on every single note. It was just a little tidbit of satisfaction against the dickety Dong. Pica was my latest affliction. Pica. An abnormal desire to eat substances, such as dirt, chalk, or ash, not normally eaten. Fast forward. I get a promotion, however, due to lack of office space during renovations, I get to share a temporary space with Dong and all his plant children for the next 9 cozy months. No options, no other place to move to, and I was ready. Dong's day would start by finding strategically placed spoons in the dirt of random potted plants. I would say things to Dong like, "Man, I would like to take a suck of that succulent. I have a great recipe for that juniper bonsai. Is that air plant salt-free?" Watching my intake. Some days I would ask him these questions through a dirt-stained upper lip. Finale. Although it was easy, I got Dong to admit he could have cleared my demerits by resubmitting paperwork back to HR, but Dong chose not to do so. Instead, he told me to go prove it. Sounds easy enough. I simply explained to the head of HR. Newt was a great office mate, but I had allergies and a special condition aggravated by any plant that required dirt. All my medical notes were on file to prove it. Due to the fact that all of HR hated Dong too. It took all of 5 minutes. And so the story ends. Dong had to take all his plant babies home until after the move that turned out to be over a year. Dong put up a weak fight, accused me of being a plant molester. I told Dong to go prove it. Fin. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.